Everybody, welcome to Understanding the Truth About the Extraterrestrial Phenomena and the Mystery of Saturn Part 2. Now, in Part 1, we kind of sort of got into the history of space travel as it pertains to Mars and everything that was going on Mars. We got into Saturn a little bit, and as I said, this DVD will be a lot more geared towards Saturn, and it will be. It's a lot going on with Saturn that a lot of people don't understand. It's a lot of esoteric and occult things about Saturn that we need to get into in this video, because when you go back to the ancient world, when you start looking at things, all things occult and esoteric, when you start looking into the whole deification of the sun, it's a misconception, and we're going to get into that in this video. You got to understand, a lot of the times when it's talking about the sun, it's actually talking about Saturn. Remember, I talked about in Saturn and Satan Part 1 how how Saturn used to be a sun, and you're going to really understand it a lot more in this DVD. A lot of information. There's a lot of things still going on with Saturn today. A lot of new stuff coming up with Saturn, as we'll get into. But you'll understand how, even more so in this DVD, why the occult is dealing with Saturn, and what is it that is unique about Saturn as it pertains to us and our past. So we're going to get into that and a lot more. Again, thanks for watching. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's get right into Saturn. Let's begin with Saturn mythology. Now, Saturn, or Saturnus, who was the Roman god in Roman mythology, basically equivalent to the Greek Kronos, where they basically got him from. Now, we're talking about 5th century BCE, right? So we had the Temple of Saturn built in Rome around 497 BCE. So this was something that they wasn't just, messing around with. This was something serious for them to build the kind of monuments they built to Saturn and everything that surrounds Saturn mythology. These people were serious about Saturn. So now you also had a festival in Rome called Saturnalia. Now, Saturnalia was basically a festival that started December 17th to December 23rd. And they basically made a sacrifice to the temple of Saturn. They exchanged gifts. They basically partied. Now, Saturnalia was also called the Festival of Light. They basically lit a bunch of candles that celebrated their quest for enlightenment, their quest for knowledge and truth. Now, also, you had, after the festival, you had the birthday of the unconquerable sun, which was December 23rd. So, this all goes into the whole winter solstice thing. This goes into Jesus and the whole Jesus mythology about him being born December 25th. It's not a coincidence that the birth and death of Jesus is right around the same time when you get into the winter solstice. So you have Jesus dying on the cross of the zodiac and rising again, with the whole rising of the sun after the winter solstice. Remember, the sun is dead for a couple of days, then it rises again, symbolizing rebirth. This is what all this stuff is talking about. This is what it's getting into. But there's more to this, because you got to understand which sun it's talking about. You got to understand what Rome was really about, what their place was, what they was trying to do as far as getting out of the ancient world and bringing into place a new kind of let's say mythology, or a new kind of way to spread their rule. And it's basically what took place when you have Christianity come into place, which we're going to get into. So after they celebrated the birthday of the unconquerable sun, they celebrated the renewal of light, which was basically New Year's. So the Romans basically celebrated these things for over 500 years until Christianity came into play and basically, outlawed everything and said everything was pagan and devil worship or what have you. Even their own worship, even the documentation of them being pagans or what have you, Christianity came into play, and then we eventually get Christmas and New Year. So this is basically where this stuff comes from. It all really goes back to Saturn. So now we already know that they worship Saturn as a sun. Now, the thing we're going to get into in this video is you have to understand, when was Saturn a sun? And a lot of people will tell you, and from a lot of books that you will read, that Saturn was a sun that wasn't that long ago. Now, you got to think about it. If they was worshiping Saturn back in the 5th century BCE. That's not that long ago. That's in human history, recorded history, so to speak. They was worshiping Saturn as a sun. So think about it. It wasn't a telescope wasn't invented until like the 17th century. So they obviously was seeing something that pertains to Saturn, and it was something about Saturn that they seen that made them worship it. Besides, just the rings. And this is what we're going to get into, because you got to understand about this Saturn as a sun and what it really pertains to. And a lot of times, what you're going to find out in this video as well, when we think it's talking about the sun that we know of today, it's talking about Saturn. So then they had to have been able to see Saturn from Earth. And when you pay attention to the other planets that they are obsessed with in the occult, particularly Mars and Venus. Now, I mentioned before, Venus, when it goes into its 8-year cycle, it does so in the shape of a 5-pointed star. And we know the 5-pointed star is associated with, Satanism. It's associated with witchcraft. It's associated with Lucifer, the light bearer. And we know when a lot of people see this is immediately what they run to. Now, also, what a lot of people don't realize is Venus and Mars aligns with Saturn to give us this, to give us the great light, to give us the bright star. This is a very ancient symbol that you're going to see a lot in this video, and you're going to see a lot in the ancient world when you look. Now, also, during the formation of these 3 planets, of the planets aligning, you get this symbol of the crescent and the star. And again, this is another symbol that we see a lot in the ancient world. Now, most people, when you see the crescent and the star, you got to understand which one you're looking at. You got to understand if you're looking at ancient world symbol, which is what we see commonly in ancient Mesopotamia. You see this with the Assyrians, the Babylonians, or what have you. The formation, the beginning of the formation of these planets. But then you also get the crescent and star when you're looking at the moon and the sun, which alludes to a lot of stuff in Islam, as I talked about before. 2 separate things. And this is something that confused a lot of people in their research. You got to understand what it's talking about. And if you don't understand about this formation that takes place and about this bright star, remember, Venus is the bright and morning star. But you got to understand about the bright star and why they call it the bright star and what it all pertains to, which we're going to get into. Now, a lot of you have seen this before. Now, the Assyrians and the Babylonians, just like the ancient Egyptians, they left behind a lot of clues, a lot of artifacts that we can still see today. Now, in this depiction, you see the seated man. You see these 3 men, and you see this wheel. Now, when you look at the wheel, look at the power coming from it. Look at the shape, the design it's in. It kind of sort of resembles the morning star I just showed you with the alignment of the planets. Now, to a lot of people, it represents Saturn. And when you look at the wheel, when you look at that alignment, it kind of sort of looks exactly like it. So there are other things in this whole picture as well. When you look at the wavy lines on the ground, when you look at the waves in the body of the seated man, as well as the 3rd man in line, they have waves in their bodies as well. Now, a lot of people believe that these waves represent energy, power. You see the waves on the wheel as well. This is supposed to represent the power of Saturn, the energy that Saturn is supposed to be putting out, and how it's affecting us in reality. Now, the seated man is supposed to represent Shamash. Shamash is the Babylonian sun god who is associated with the planet Saturn. So now when a lot of people see this is something that a lot of people do not put together, the association of Shamash and Saturn. So now a lot of people in the ancient world said that Shamash represents Saturn, and Saturn being the dark star. It was another name they had for Saturn as the dark star. This is something that you'll find throughout the ancient world, and in a lot of readings you'll hear people refer to Saturn as the dark star, being like this sun that basically puts out the same energy, has the same effects on the planet as the sun that we know today, the morning sun. But this sun has the same effects but also other effects on the planet. Remember, we can't ignore back in ancient times how much they worshiped the sun or Saturn. So supposedly there were two suns in the sky. This whole second sun that they are referring to was supposed to be the sun we know today. The sun we know today is the second sun, and the first sun is supposed to be Saturn. Now, the symbol that the seated man or Shamash is holding in his hand is supposed to represent Thorazaz. Now, Thorazaz is a symbol that is seen all throughout the ancient world. You'll see it a lot. When you understand it, you'll start pointing it out a lot more. Now, Thorazaz is associated with monsters. It's associated with giants. It's associated with the god Thor and Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. And we know that these things are supposed to represent power. Thor's hammer has electricity. It's a powerful weapon. Thorazaz is also associated with the planet Mars. Now, again, these things start to come together when you start paying attention. And as I said, this glyph, this picture has a lot of stuff in it that we can't get all into right now. But when you look at it, you also see the same type of representation in ancient Egypt. So the Assyrians and the Babylonians was both trying to tell us the same things, as well as a bunch of other cultures around the world. They was trying to point out something, and it pertains to Saturn, as we'll get into. But now, I want to read from David Talbert's book called The Saturn Myth. And I want you to understand, like, a lot of people got into this stuff. A lot of people really talk about this kind of information. And as you can see, he wanted to give us that symbol, as you can see clearly on the front page. And again, this is a really, really ancient symbol. So it's saying here, anyone attempting to trace the Saturn legend must reckon with the primordial god figure whom ancient races celebrated as the Great Father, and who is said to have first organized the heavens and founded the antediluvian kingdom. Antediluvian basically means a kingdom without the religious control that we basically see today. The antediluvian kingdom of peace and plenty, the golden age. While few of us today can locate Saturn in the starry sphere, the earliest astral religions insist that the planet god was once the all-powerful ruler of heaven, but paradoxically, they also declared that he resided on earth as a great king. He was also the father both of gods and men. This dual character of the Great Father has been the subject of a centuries-long but unresolved debate. Was he a living ancestor, subsequently exaggerated into a cosmic divinity, or was he originally a celestial god whom later myths reduced to human proportions? The overwhelming preoccupation of ancient ritual is with an ancient great god. The myths say that the god emerged alone from the cosmic sea as the preeminent power in the heavens. Out of watery chaos, remember the waters of Noon, he produced a new order. The ancients worshipped him as the creator and the supreme lord of the cosmos. This solitary god, according to the legend, founded a kingdom of unparalleled splendor. He was the divine ancestor of all earthly rulers. His kingdom, the prototype of the just and prosperous realm. Throughout his reign, an unending spring prevailed. The land produced freely, and men knew neither labor nor war. And the god king's towering form, means giant, ancients perceive the heaven man, a primordial giant whose body was the newly organized cosmos. The legends often present the figure as the first man or primordial man, whose history personified the struggle of good and evil. Whether emphasized the Great Father's character as creator, first king, or heaven man, widespread traditions proclaim him to be the planet Saturn. In investigating the traits of the archaic god, we must give greatest weight to the oldest astral religions, those which are closest to the original experience. The best material coming from ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia provides a remarkably coherent picture of the god and enables one to see the development and the distortions of the idea among later peoples. The ancients conceived Saturn as the visible intelligence bringing forth the cosmos as his own body and regulating its revolutions. Thus was the planet denominated the Heaven Man, a being eventually recalled as the prototype of the human race, the first ancestor. When Saturn departed the world, the golden age catastrophically ended. This is the universal tale of the dying god, the overthrown first king or fallen first man. Whether betrayed by a dark force or chastised for having committed the forbidden sin or inflicted with old age. Notice this has to do with war and time and a weariness of mankind. The result is the same. A corruption of nature, which we are seeing today, and a progressive worsening of the human condition, which we have seen. The story is the first, and one could almost say only theme of tragedy and drama in antiquity. Saturn's golden age came to a sudden and catastrophic end, either caused by or accompanied by the fall of the great god. Now, when you read that, when you start getting into talks like this about Saturn, talking about the ancient mythologies and fables, Saturn, when it's talking about this great man, it's talking about Saturn. Understand, it's God that he's talking about, this king that he's talking about. He is metaphorically talking about Saturn. It's a parable in that too. You got to understand that these people, as I said, they can't give it straight to you. They're giving it to you in parables. So what he's talking about, David Talbert, he's talking about Saturn being this man. But again, it's a parable within that as well. Understand, everybody talks about this war. So when I say this to you, that in ancient times, they was talking about this war that happened. They was talking about the planet being at peace and stuff like that. Things were good. Something happened. And a lot of people trying to wrap their head around what that was. So again, you had a planet of peace. Everything was fine. Everything was good. Then something happened. And a lot of it is alluding to Saturn falling from a sun, from a star into basically what it is. And because of that, that brought about the destruction of the planet and the worsening, as he said, of people. And this is something that you are definitely going to see. I'm going to get into in this video as well. Now, when you get into this whole thing so far, when we talk about Samaj, when you look at the depiction of these giants, and I talked about this before, I believe that there was giants here. Everything in my research shows me that that's true. With all of the claims from people who actually work for the Smithsonian, who says that they threw bones in the oceans, they've been hiding giant bones for decades. They are really, who are you going to call when you find these bones? Just think about it. If you found the bones of a giant, you call the authorities or you call whoever that will come and basically cover up the situation. Now, you got to understand, even if it happened today, they have the power to make sure that no pictures get out. You would have to find it yourself, take the pictures, hide the pictures. And if you did post them, hope that a lot of people download them, because they have the capability today to delete them all, to get it from off the internet. So you got to understand that Smithsonian basically was going around covering up these bones and covering up people finding these giant skeletons or what have you. A lot of the pictures that we see today, I don't believe is real, but some of them possibly could be. But, we know it's a cover-up. But again, I talked about this before. So many ancient civilizations talking about giants and giants coming down to Earth. So if they talking about giants coming down to Earth, then this means that, they was there to see it, meaning that men was already here when these giants was coming down. So the Bible talks about the sons of God coming into the daughters of men. Now, a lot of us believe that these giants coming down was from Saturn. This is where they came from. And that they came down here and they set up kingdoms. Now, again, we wasn't created here. We was obviously created somewhere else, and we was put here for whatever reason. And whatever happened, happened. But these giants at some point must have came down and they began to set up, kingdoms and rule. And so whatever happened to them happened. So again, the sons of God coming into the daughters of men, as I talked about before, it's not uncommon to see this as being possible, as these regular men that was already here on Earth having children, and then these giants coming down and having sex with them. As I talked about, they say that these giants range between 7 and 30 feet tall. These are some huge beings. It's not inconceivable to see a 7 or 8 foot man having sex with a regular woman, as I showed you before with Shaq and Hoops, Yao Ming and his wife. You're talking about really tall people, even Manute Bol and his wife, really tall people that exist, that we know exist, having sex with, even shorter than average women. So it's not uncommon. So a lot of people believe that they came down, they set up these kingdoms, and they did bear children with regular human women, and they would be the heir to these kingdoms. So again, this is stuff that is, one, they try to hide, but you find it in so many different places in antiquity about these giants coming down, to the planet. Now, obviously, something happened to those ancient civilizations. Something happened that caused things to go from one way to, to another. So now we are basically left with a bunch of artifacts and a bunch of evidence, but really we don't have the complete picture. We're still trying to put it together. So a lot of us are still left wondering, what the hell happened? What's going on? Now, I talked about Ptah, talked about Atum, and the whole ancient Egyptian creation story. So now when you go back and you look at what the ancients was talking about, they clearly understood that something, from space created Earth, created us. Now, the thing is, what the evidence is alluding to is that this has a lot to do with Saturn, that Saturn somehow has a lot to do with our creation. So when you go back and you start looking at the early depictions of God and of the sun, you see these, you see this, and this. Now, we had it all wrong. They had it all wrong when they first found these symbols. A lot of people saw these symbols, and remember, they called it the sun symbol. Remember, with the hole. And you look at the other symbol, and it was supposed to represent the zodiac. But these are really ancient symbols. Really ancient. And what they represent is this. And they basically represent the aligning of the planets with Saturn. Now, when you look at that, it makes a lot more sense. One, when you look at the sun we have today, you're trying to figure out what is that dot in the middle? What is that hole there? Now, when you apply the whole image of the alignment of the planets, this symbol makes more sense. And then when you couple that with the star, with the whole light that it produces, the other symbol makes sense as well. Now, one of the other things this symbol with the crosshairs represent is basically the 4 phases of solar configuration. The 4 phases of solar configuration. And these configurations basically is when the alignment is taking place. And when it's basically coming from out of alignment, you will get these solar configurations. Now, understand, we're talking about stuff that we see with the Assyrians, the whole, ancient Mesopotamia. Now, when you look over the Arabian desert, you see this symbol. They still have it down there. Take a look. You see the symbol of this solar configuration. And when you see those carvings, when you see those drawings in the ground, this whole alignment that's talking about this solar alignment, it's something that was documented that you can't overlook. So again, when we start looking into this thing, there's a lot more to Saturn that meets the eye. So now, even when you look at the crescent and star, when you look at this solar configuration that gives us the crescent and star, it makes more sense that it pertains to Saturn and not with the moon and our sun, the sun that we know today. Because one, when you look at Islam, we're talking about the worship of the Kaaba. And they're walking around the Kaaba. The Kaaba is the black square. We know the black square has to do with Saturn. It is unmistakable. So again, what you're going to find, and I'm going through this because what you're going to find, as I said, is a lot of the things that we pertain to the sun we know of today does not equate to that. It is talking about Saturn as a sun. So now, here's the thing. And this is one of the things that will confuse you. And unless you one of them people that really do really deep research and you really question everything. This is why I question everything that they tell us. Even the books that I read, I go and do the research and I question the sources. Excuse me, because you have to. Because a lot of people, even the excerpt that I gave you from David Talbert's book, it's a lot of misconceptions in there, a lot of stuff that he don't understand clearly, and a lot of mistakes. But when you a person that really research, you get this stuff. But what is known in esoteric circles, deep in esoteric circles, and deeply in the occult, is that the ancients, the people who was in the mystery schools, the people who really understood this information, their day began at night. Plain and simple. That makes a whole lot more sense when you hear that. Their day started at night. There's no way you can catalog and calculate the heavens, that you can, deify the things that they deify, like the moon and the sun. You get what I'm saying now? It makes more sense. Unless you begin your day at night. Because one, the sun that we know today, the sunlight, basically hid everything. The heavens or, space didn't really reveal itself until the sun went down. You start to understand what the Book of the Dead is talking about more, going forth by day. What it's talking about is alluding to the sun going down. We'll get into this a lot more later. But everything basically started to take place when the sun went down and then Saturn was visible. But, it doesn't take away from any of the mythologies, or you can completely understand why the sun that we see in the sky today could be deified. Make no mistake. It's not a mistake that it is deified, because it has the power that it has, as I talked about in the previous video. But when you understand that the ancients, that they begin their day at night, and that Saturn was also a sun, that there was two suns, when you understand this, a lot of things start to open up for you in your research, and things start to make a lot more sense. And you start to see that, wait a minute, a lot of stuff that we ascribe to, the sun we see outside today is really talking about Saturn, and Saturn during the time it was a sun. And that becomes a lot more clear the deeper you go into the ancient world. So again, almost every time we're looking at a depiction or something alluding to our sun in ancient times, it's not talking about the sun in the sky today. It's talking about Saturn as a sun. It's really important that you understand that this is a big deal, really big deal. So now when you go back and you look, remember, you have in Judaism, and Judaism is basically the worship of Greek mythology, which is the worship of, basically stealing from Egyptian mythology. But again, when you break down Greek mythology, it's getting into the worship of Kronos, Saturn, still dealing with Saturn. Remember, the Jews, it all goes back to Greek. Remember, as I pointed out in my videos, how the Greeks, Ptolemy II Philadelphia is how they created Judaism or what have you. Remember, the Old Testament, everything, all parallels from Greek mythology, which deals with Kronos and the worship of Saturn. This is why the Jews have the black square, the black square you see on their head. I know you've seen that before. So you see why the Jews worship on Saturday or Saturn Day. Even when you look at the ancient Phoenicians, they worship El. El represents Saturn. So we have the Greeks worshiping Kronos, Saturn, dealing with Judaism, the worship of Greek mythology, which goes back to Saturn. Same thing with ancient Phoenician, Saturn. When you look at Rome, they have the worship of Saturnus, which is, again, Saturn. So we find it everywhere in the ancient world. And, we see it in Rome predominantly, leading up to the creation of Christianity and the coming of the sun, the worship of the sun, or Jesus Christ, which basically corresponds with the fallen Saturn or the fallen Satan, the day star or the falling star or what have you. It's just what all this stuff is talking about. It all alludes to Saturn. It's all talking about Saturn and Saturn as a sun. No coincidence. You have Jesus representing the sun that we see today. But when you really get into it, you can also put Jesus as being Saturn when you really look at different aspects and you look at what Jesus is associated with. We know Satan is Saturn. So you have, the sun we know of today, Jesus, and you have Saturn, you have a connection. There's a lot more to that, but I want to go back. Let's go back to Atum Ra or Atum Re, however you want to pronounce it, and let's look at, this whole thing with the sun. We know that Ra is the eye, the eye of Ra. We know that Ra represents the sun. So the whole thing is, does the sun today, the sun that we have anything to do with an eye? No. So when a lot of people look at Ra as being the sun or Jesus, Horus being the sun, or Horus and Jesus being the same, they are confused. Now, it's not a problem that a lot of people get confused by this. A lot of people make this connection because it's just common sense to put it as the sun we know of today. But when you understand that it's talking about Saturn as a sun, it makes a lot more sense. Does Saturn have an eye? Yes, Saturn has an eye. So we know about Saturn being, having a storm. We know how Saturn with the shape, how it looks like an eye looking down. When you look at the formation of Saturn, when it's starting to formate or come into formation with the planet Mars and with Venus, again, when you see the crescent shape, the crescent in the star, then look at Lord of the Rings. Let's look at Sauron. Remember, the eye of Sauron represents that shape. You see it as a burning eye, representing Saturn as a sun. Remember, Saturn, the Lord of the Rings. And this is where the stuff is going to. So we can see clearly that the eye is representing Saturn. And this is what it's trying to tell you. It's trying to tell you that it's representing the eye, that it's talking about Saturn and not the sun we know of today. A lot of people won't make that connection. And a lot of us, I remember when I first, start getting into this information, the same thing. I had in the back of my head, well, Saturn as a sun, it does make more sense. But it's really hard to go there with Saturn as the sun. But it all makes more sense than the sun we know of today being this eye. So when the ancients looked up at Saturn before the formation, they saw this. They saw Saturn as the eye. They seen Venus. They seen Mars. And we know that the ancient Egyptians love to connect the dots. They love to draw things out of the stars or what have you. So the ancient world, again, was about Saturn and Saturn as a sun. Now, I talked about in Saturn and Satan Part 1 about Saturn being in the Bible. When you read Acts 7:43, it says, "Yea, ye took up the tabernacle of Moloch, and the star of your god Remphion, figures which ye made to worship them, and I will carry you away beyond Babylon." Now, did we not just look at, Babylon or ancient Mesopotamia, Assyria, and see these symbols and see that they worship Saturn? Remphion is Saturn. This is what it's alluding to. And when you look up, you can just Google it, Remphion, you'll see it. You'll see what it's talking about. You'll see the star, the so-called Star of David, or the Star of Saturn. You'll see Moloch. When you look at the talisman of Saturn, you'll see Moloch on one side. You'll see the star. Now, remember, Moloch, they sacrificed babies to Moloch. Remember, Kronos, he ate babies. Whenever you see the depictions of that old man eating the baby, that's Kronos. It's the same thing. It's alluding to Saturn, the same stuff. So we know that the star is supposed to represent Satan, that whole five-pointed star, what have you, and it represents Satan because Satan is Saturn. This is what it's all talking about. When you look at the back of a dollar bill, when you look at the crest on the back with the pyramid, you put a star over it. Same thing. You have the star of Saturn. You have the eye of Lucifer, the eye of Satan, the eye of Saturn. Same thing when you put an eye over the layout of Washington, D.C. When you put that star there, you have the star of Saturn. The eye represents, same thing, Lucifer, Saturn, Satan, what have you. But the eye goes over the Scottish Rite Masonic Lodge, as I explained before. So all of this stuff is going back to Saturn. Now, it's funny how when Saturn fell as a star, because it used to be worshipped as a star, everybody in the ancient world worshipped Saturn as a star. When it fell as a star, everything changed. The ancient world was over. Everything was different. And you have basically African people being conquered. The people who was in power was overthrown. was taken over when Saturn fell as a star. That's something really important to think about. So as black people, we got to look at the fall of Saturn as a sun and look at how Christianity came into play, how modern day religion came into play, and the fall of our, rulership came into play after Saturn fell. That's something you really got to think about. Saturn was called the black sun, the black star. And everybody deeply that's in esoteric studies gets into this, black and white. A lot of people who are really in the know understand the power of Saturn, and that the powers that be have, consequently changed this stuff into Satan. So that if you was a person who was curious and you was trying to research this stuff and you start getting into this information, guess what you're going to keep running into? I talked about this in my earliest DVDs. Every time I was studying, I kept running into Satan. Every time I got somewhere, I kept running into Satan. And when you run into Satan as a religious person or a person who is not fully conscious, you run back to the Lord. You run back to that Bible. And it's exactly why it was designed that way, to keep you running back. And the thing I kept thinking about was, Satan is real. Satan is 100% real. These people are talking about Satan, 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 Satan. Me not understanding, what it all is. It's talking about Saturn. So we as black people got to understand when Saturn fell as a sun, we had the rise of Christianity and modern day religion, us thrown into slavery, our lands conquered, everything taken away from us. So what was it about Saturn that kept us in power? Talked about this before, you got to think about, one, the possible effects that Saturn as a sun can have on melanated people. Just think about us absorbing that kind of light. What would it do to us? What would be possible? What would be possible for us to do with that sun present? And we don't know. We don't know. We don't know what that's really about or what's going on with that. So it's something that I have looked into for a long time, and I understand it's a lot of plants and animals extinct since that sun died out. There's a lot of things that's not around no more, a lot of things that do not grow because of that sun, being gone. So these are things that I look into because everything changed. The whole entire world changed. The ancient world was done away, and you had the rise of European power and the takeover of the Europeans when Saturn fell as a sun. Now you got to pay attention to who is good and who is bad. So when you start digging into Saturn and it's alluding to all the satanic stuff, but then when you realize that, the Europeans came up with Christianity and these religions that they supposedly worship, but behind closed door in secret, the esoteric meaning, the hidden meaning, the parable of what they're researching and worshiping alludes to Saturn. But Saturn as a sun, or Saturn as the way it is now. Now it comes into play. It starts to make a lot more sense when you see the worship of Saturn now, the way it is now. What is Saturn doing now? Think about that. Saturn is broadcasting time, as I talked about. Distorting this reality. They are celebrating it. Look at how, as I talked about before, all of these corporations have that Saturn logo. They are celebrating the Saturn now because the Saturn that we see today with the rings represents the destruction of us. It represents their power. It represents the fall of the ancient world and the rise of European power. Plain and simple. This is why they worship it. This is why they use it. Now today there's still a lot going on with Saturn. Now, they've been basically sending crafts out to Saturn since the 70s. Now, we know back in 1997, I believe it was like September 15th, 1997, they sent Cassini out to Saturn and to basically take pictures. And Cassini has been basically taking pictures and sending it back to Earth, for over 19 years now. Now, the thing is, when Cassini took off, it was carrying about, 73 pounds of plutonium, which is a lot of plutonium. To put that in perspective, understand if something would have went wrong with Cassini, if Cassini would have crashed or blew up, it would have probably killed everybody on the planet. but it probably killed all of us. It would have killed at least an estimated 5 billion people, they say, if Cassini would have crashed. Now, the reason why they say they had to use the plutonium is because it's not enough sunlight that reaches Saturn. So the plutonium was used to power Cassini because they couldn't use solar panels to keep it basically in orbit or to keep it, on its journey for so long. So, Cassini's mission is scheduled to basically end this year, September 15th this year. Cassini mission is supposed to end, and they're calling it the grand finale. Now, a lot of other people are calling it the Lucifer Project because what's supposed to happen is they are supposed to crash Cassini into Saturn. And Saturn is a gas giant. It's a huge gas giant, and we don't really know what's on Saturn. We don't really know if it's life on Saturn. Now, this is not uncommon. This is something that they have done before. They've crashed these crafts a lot, and a lot of the times they do so thinking that there is not life. Now, in '97, when the mission started, they didn't think it was possible for there to be life on Saturn. Now, today, they believe it might be possible. So we got to wait and see if they actually going to crash the shuttle or not. But people think that, if they crash it, it might ignite something and maybe they're trying to turn Saturn back into a sun again. I don't know. I don't believe that, but, we don't know exactly what these people are doing. But it's weird that they do things like this. Now, again, it's not uncommon. The thing is, the research on Saturn has been ongoing for a long time, decades. For what? What is it? And, we are told, well, one, we know we can't get outside the Becker-Hagen's grid, the whole Van Allen radiation belt, I should say. We can't get out of it. So the whole exploration into Saturn and into Titan, which they also been going there a lot too. Remember, Titan would be the only planet, which is a moon of Saturn, not a planet, but it's the only thing closest to Earth. And it will be cool to live on Titan because on Titan, we could basically damn near fly. It's the gravity is light. You can jump super high on Titan. And yeah, it's cool. It will be cool to live there, but we can't get there. And that brings me to my point of why all the exploration, why all the research, why spending the millions and billions of dollars to build these spacecrafts to send them out there to do this research for what? What is going on? So that tells me there's a lot more to Saturn than they are telling us. But it's funny that this whole space shuttle crash thing, that they would, detonate that kind of yield of plutonium onto Saturn and cause that kind of explosion for whatever reason. And a lot of people think it's not even going to reach ground because it's supposed to be this storm. Saturn is supposed to be engulfed in this huge storm. They think it's going to probably blow up within its atmosphere. But still, we'll see, what'll happen. But it's just weird. So now, again, through recorded history, when we go back and look at ancient times, we see definitely something up with Saturn, and that it has changed a lot. So again, with this symbol, it is representing the alignment of the planets with Saturn, and then you have this symbol as well representing the four solar configurations. But this also represents the four pillars of Earth. When you see this symbol a lot in more modern day, you'll see that it represents the four pillars of Earth, which is basically time, day, month, year. That's fitting for it to be associated with Saturn, since Saturn, the god of Saturn, is the god of time. And a lot of people see that symbol. Remember, we see this symbol behind the head of Jesus. And a lot of people say it represents the birth and death of Saturn. And we know Jesus died on the cross. There's a cross there. And remember, I talked about this in the Mystery Schools, Volume 3, the new one I just put out, about how, remember, you gotta see that Jesus' life and death deals with December 25th. I believe I talked about that in this video as well. It deals with December 25th. And December 25th, the winter solstice and all that, you have Jesus dying on the cross. Jesus being supposedly born December 25th. Now, Jesus' birth or death deals with December 25th or anywhere around the winter solstice time. That will make him what? A Capricorn. Capricorn is ruled by what? Saturn. Plain and simple. So you have that association with Jesus and Saturn. So it makes you think again, is Jesus representing the sun in the sky or Saturn? And what his birth date being, or his death date, whatever one you want to call it, being associated with Capricorn and Saturn, we can look towards Saturn, but it also represents the sun in the sky, plain and simple. Both suns, we could say it represents Satan as well. Remember how I showed you before in the Saturn and Satan series how Jesus is Satan as well, the whole numerology, same thing. So we got to look at this stuff, and we got to understand it's a lot more to Saturn. There's a lot more we're going to go into talking about Saturn in DVDs to come. But let's go back to Shamash and this whole inscription here, this whole thing, this whole picture. Let's take a look at it again. So now when you look at the picture, you see that the man at the top of the picture, you see he has almost like a snake or serpent body, and he is controlling the wheel. This is a representation of the encircled serpent or the circled serpent. And you see he's controlling the world. The wheel is supposed to represent time. Now, this is a very old ancient symbol you see again around the world like the other symbols. And a lot of different cultures had this encircled serpent. You see Adowido with the Nigerians and the Congo. They had the rainbow encircled serpent or the rainbow serpent that represent the creation of Earth, the creation of the planet. You see it in Mexico. They have an encircled serpent. They have Ouroboros. You see with the alchemists, they have a circular serpent as well. You see in Hinduism, they have a circular serpent. You see in ancient Egypt, you see the circular serpent around the sun. You see this all the time. And it's supposed to be Wadjet, around the sun. And we understand what that really means when you see Wadjet around the sun, circling the sun, over top of Horus' head. You see this symbol a lot of times in ancient Kemet, supposedly representing the creation, believe it or not, a creation. So you see this symbol in a lot of different places. You see it in the ancient world in a lot of different cultures, and it has a very important meaning that we're really going to get into in the coming DVDs. This stuff goes back far, and the thing is, it's not so much information, but the problem is there's so many different people talking about the same thing, but with different types of interpretation. So you really got to do your own research and really get into everybody's research. Unfortunately, you got to read everybody's stuff and come together and get the correct explanation. Now you also have Ra versus Apophis. Now, Apophis is supposed to be the enemy of Ra. He's supposed to be the one who threatens Ra during his travels through the astral world, through space or through the heavens. And Apophis is called the serpent of rebirth. He is called the encircler of the world. So when you look at the depictions of Apophis, you always see that Ra is on his boat. He's always trying to attack the serpent. You see other depictions of like the cat trying to cut Apophis' head off. And, I wanted to look for any kind of depiction of an enemy of Ra. So, or enemy, of the sun, because you got to think about that. When you have what we have as far as the mystery of Saturn, and Saturn is a big mystery. And when you have the ancient world and everybody talking about Saturn as the sun, what happened with it? So if Saturn had an enemy, what was it? So when you see this reptilian, this snake, Apophis, again, it could be alluding to, the reptilian brain and the fall of man. When you consider that the sun is supposed to represent the pineal gland and everything like that, Ra is supposed to represent the sun or what have you, we can look at it in that context. But it all really goes back into this whole reptilian thing. And as I talked about in part 1, when we look at supposedly it's supposed to be so many different races of these aliens that's coming to Earth and has visited Earth, and we look at the reptilians, and it's supposed to be 2 types of species. something happened, and it clearly involves them. Again, it's no coincidence we have this dinosaur period. And it's the thing that nobody who deals with this whole thing, I feel like I'm the only person, it's the thing that nobody in this whole conscious community, nobody that's really looking into antiquity is really talking about. So many people is just consumed with Kemet. And I just showed you a bunch of stuff from Mesopotamia, from the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and the stuff that they talked about. They also talked about Saturn. So we got to look everywhere. But when you go back and you start looking at this whole dinosaur shit, it's more to it. And they would have us believe, okay, the dinosaurs roamed the earth and ate leaves, and Tyrannosaurus Rex just went around eating shit. And it was what it was. The earth was real hot. But what happened to them? What killed them off? For real. Where did they go? Or did they go? We already have the proof that we coexisted with them. So it's a lot more to it. We look at all of the pictures and depictions that I have shown you that shows the war between us and the dragons, all of the whole dragon mythology that we got into in the previous videos. So this is what everything is pointing to. And when you keep seeing these depictions of serpents and everything like that, and dragons and dinosaurs or what have you, in this war between man and them, you can only think that something happened to this effect. Who knows? It's a lot of really old stories about a dinosaur world, and about the Lemurians and who they really was, about the people who was on Saturn and who they really was, and about the evolution of this planet. Now, again, with the dinosaurs being here, you have one story that's talking about the dinosaurs being put here to be watched or to see if they can evolve. And they evolve too fast. I think I talked about this before in an old video that's on YouTube, but they evolve too fast. And supposedly the person or beings that created them destroyed them because they evolved too fast. And they became too powerful or too sophisticated, something to that effect. And it was destroyed and basically knocked down in consciousness and dumbed down to be, what we know them as leaf eating, T-Rex chasing and all that, dinosaurs, like acting like animals. And supposedly this consciousness drifted down throughout the animal world to where you have animals not, on a level of sophistication, but a primitive level as, what we call animals. So it's a lot of stories to that effect, but there's no real validity to any of that, because you would think if they were so advanced, we would find traces of it. But then again, if the world was destroyed by fire or destroyed by whatever happened, it could be at the bottom of the ocean for all we know. No, we don't really know. But it's a lot more to the dinosaurs and a lot more to the ancient world than we know. And they're probably the only ones who got the information or any kind of proof that would allude to that. Now, I know they just found another Egyptian pyramid, I believe it was today or yesterday, something like that. And of course, we can't trust the Arabs and what they're going to tell us or show us that's in this pyramid. I found another pyramid in Kemet in Egypt. And it's supposed to be going back to, I think, the 17th century BCE. And it's old. And of course, and they started to dig it out, and it's supposed to be, they don't know if it's intact or how big it is yet. They're still digging it out. So we're going to see. And to me, if they didn't hide all the depictions already that was in Egypt, now we have the Hanrak-Opolis slate, the whole Narmer palette that has what looks like dinosaurs on it. That is like the closest thing that we see to the Egyptians showing something as dinosaurs. But we don't know. If we're going to find anything ancient that's going to tell us this story of anything dealing with, the ancient world and dinosaurs, is going to be in Mesopotamia. It's going to be in ancient Kemet. It might be in Israel. It's going to be somewhere in the ancient world that we're going to find it. But the problem is these dudes control it. And if they find it, they're going to keep it from us. Hopefully one day somebody have the balls to leak some of these pictures and stuff that's there. I know when you go to Kemet, there's certain places that you can't go unless you pay big money. Some places they won't let you in unless you pay 10 grand to get in the door. Seriously, there's some tombs, there's some things that they won't let you see. And a lot of doors is locked. I remember that from when I first went. So I'm anxious to go back to see what's open and what's available to see. And I might end up spending some money because I want to see what's behind some of these doors. But I doubt if they'll let me photograph anything or take video. But I still want to see with my own eyes. But it's a lot more to this, that we got to find out. We got to uncover as we go along. So again, we see Saturn as a sun representing the ancient world. That world is gone, and we see the rise of this new Saturn, this gas giant that is secretly worshipped in esoteric circles. I shouldn't say esoteric circles. I should say, by the powers that be, the power elite. They represent this representation of Saturn. And when you put everything together, one of the things is they have to completely keep the perpetuation of Jesus and the Bible and religion gone. It's just that simple. If not for anything, to get the people who are studying in the mystery schools to understand this information, they talk to each other through movies, through books, through commercials, through sporting events. I'm convinced of that now. That the Super Bowls and the NBA Finals and stuff like that are rituals or things that they are putting out. Now, it's very hard for you to rig a game. I mean, because you just can't really pay a player to basically rig a game. You would have to bribe the whole team because you can't be 100% sure that shot is going to miss. You get what I'm saying? When a person shoots the ball, you can't be sure he's going to miss. You can't be sure the whole team is going to miss. So the best thing you can do is bribe the referees. And when you start paying attention to a lot of these games, you see that it's a lot of critical calls that the referees make that determine the outcome of a lot of games. So I don't think it's so much that the maybe some players is bought off, but it seems, and I'll probably do a video on this. You can see a lot of the symbolism in a lot of the Super Bowls. You can see a lot of the hitting stuff in the NBA Finals as well. We've seen it all in the Olympics in 2012 and everything like that. So, all of this stuff goes back to Saturn. So, again, when we look at the celebrities and that they are using Baphomet, that they are worshiping Saturn and throwing up the eye and talking about Illuminati, all this and that, this is all their stuff. Again, it's all about them. The whole Jesus worship and everything is all them, plain and simple. And you would think that a person who understands this kind of information would not worship Jesus, but they have to. They got to perpetuate the religion. But at the same time, it's saying you worship the powers that be because they basically, it's Jesus. They basically are the ones in power, this government structure, as I said. They're also Satan. So getting these rappers and everybody who we think is worshiping Satan to put up these symbols and to basically display these things in their music and videos is giving all glory to their Saturn and their power. And it's basically what we're seeing. And a lot of people can't put their finger on it because a lot of people, when they see it and they see that it corresponds with Satan, you can't get them away from that. Nothing you can say is going to make them think that it's not satanic, it's not bad. They're going to automatically go to Satan and keep their faith in Jesus. So a lot of people who I talked to who tried to do the research, when I spoke to them again, they said, man, you're crazy. Satan is real. And I tried to tell them that, I was at that point, but I had to go beyond. I had to dig into, Satanism. I had to get into it, witchcraft and everything like that to figure out the truth. It was spooky. It was scary, as I said before. But it was like, man, either I'm going to be stuck here and just say, fuck it, I'm a Christian, I'm a Bible believer, or I'm going to take that plunge and try to figure out the truth. And that's what I did. And that's what a lot of people have to do. If any of you watching this and you, for some reason, still believe in the Bible and you on hiatus, or I should say you got doubt, you basically you leaning, teeter-tottering, trying to figure out what the truth is, you need to go ahead and take that plunge. I mean, really, if you watched most of the videos I put out, especially the ones on Satan or anything like that, Saturn, Satan, that you should get your answer through those videos. But if you want to go in it alone on your own, yeah, it gets spooky. But it's going to help you out when you break it down yourself. When you get into Crawley, when you start getting into Manly P. Hall and everybody like that, Blavatsky, Alice A. Bailey and everybody like that. When you start getting to these people who are deemed, spooky, scary, Satanists or what have you, a lot of the information is coded. And this is what I try to tell people. When you start reading about the stuff that they supposedly done, you got to understand it's coded. That it's alluding to something else. And a lot of people are not going to get that. And a lot of people are not going to understand it. So, it's hard to push it on people. A lot of people just give up and just say, it's all devil worship. I don't want no parts of it. But if you want the truth, you got to push forward. You got to, bear down and just read and study and keep researching until you get to the truth. And you can't just give up, because of fear. There's a lot of symbolism out there, surrounding Saturn and surrounding a lot of the occult and esoteric things. So when we start to recognize it and point it out and get it into our consciousness and understand what it goes back to, it's going to help you a lot, in your research and putting together the pieces of the puzzle. Now, another thing you're going to find out, which I'm going to get into in part 3 of this series, is about how the heavenly bodies, what they call the planet's heavenly bodies, pertains to our earthly bodies, as above, so below. And again, if Saturn is dealing with the sun, and if Ra or Horus is dealing with the sun, which is dealing with the pineal gland, which is in our body, it's more to that. And we're going to get into that. And all this stuff lines up with alchemy, Egyptian high alchemy, which I got into in the part 3, I believe, of Mystery School, the video I just put out. So we're going to get into this a lot because there's a lot more to this. And we'll see how, it's crazy how this stuff really is talking about the human body in a lot of different ways. Excuse me. But when you're talking about, falling victim to your lower self, as I talked about in Mystery School Volume 3 DVD, talking about the reptilian brain. We got into that a lot. I don't want to spoil you for those who didn't see the DVD yet, but definitely want to check out that DVD as well. But again, we fell because of the lower brain, which is the reptilian brain. And all this is, again, is dealing with Saturn, which I got into. And we have to stop doing things based upon material. And this is what Saturn is about. And this is what Satan is about. This is what the controllers, the powers that be, is using to control us. Material. Everything is wrapped around it. Everything is surrounding it. But it's something else that we got to look at. And we got to understand that everything that we do, if we are a straight man or a straight woman, everything that we do is geared towards gaining the opposite sex. Now, more so with men than with women. Because you see how we is with men. Men, we go crazy. We do stupid stuff to get a woman. Everything that we do is about getting a woman. And it's about trying to become one again with the other half. The other half of you. The masculine and feminine energies coming together. So we kind of seek after this energy. And we think it has to do with a woman, which that is a big part of it. But it also has to do with ourselves. So when we see all these things pertaining to energy, mastering the male and female energies, the Kundalini rising and everything like that, it's about the masculine and feminine energies coming together. And everything that we do, that we seek after, it's about, getting the female. Everything that we get material wise, we try to get to appease a woman, to try to get a woman, to try to get acceptance from a woman, to try to, gain her trust and, be with a woman. And for most people, the only thing that we can connect this feeling with is sex. sex. I want to get her. I want to know her. I want to be with her because she stimulates me sexually. And we don't understand that it's energy behind that, and it's been corrupted to make us think that we are trying to chase after these women for sex reasons only, but we're basically really trying to find the other half of us. You hear that whole term soulmate. Where's my soulmate? And the whole soulmate thing really has to do with that. But it's not pertaining to an actual physical woman. It's pertaining to, yourself. The energy, the other half of you is your soulmate, which would be the feminine energy of your male masculinity. So you have your male energy. You need to find that female energy and bring it together. And it's the same thing with women, the masculine energy. And again, we don't know what it was that caused the woman to start producing men. So I talked about before in Saturn Satan series, the females was only producing females. You cannot get a man without a woman, period. So there's no way a man was here before a female. That's obvious. So again, as I talked about, as we got into in the Saturn Satan series about how the proof talks about, ancient times, nothing but women, and all the artifacts talking about a matriarchal system ruled by women. The Egyptians worshiped women. The woman was able to rule and everything like that. And again, something happened. We don't know how long ago that was. But then all of a sudden we see the evidence shows us man just popped out of nowhere. But before that, for a long time, nothing but women. And the male role was different when they first came on the scene than what it was when we start getting to a hunter-gatherer, which was the male. The women had something else completely different. It was working for them. Who knows what happened? I mean, it's just so much. Like, history is mind-boggling when you start looking at it. And some of the books that I've been reading through my life, I'm still trying to figure out what the hell they're talking about or what was really possible. But then as you continue to read and keep reading and put this information together, because of the books you read in the past, and, stuff will jump out at you. And then you find yourself running back, to books, to old books, trying to find them or whatever. And this is the case with me in research. And it's no different with Saturn. And when I start looking at all of the information on Saturn, and then it's just things pop in your head from, past articles that I read from people that was talking about Saturn back in ancient times, or something that they found that pertains to Saturn. It all goes together. It's just so much information. It's really hard to figure out what's exactly relevant, what's real, what's proof, what fits. So again, when I make these videos, I put them out to give you so much information, to give you a lot to really think about, because something is going to fit in your research. Something is going to fit in what your line of thinking and what you're trying to figure out. And it's going to connect the dots and start to put together the puzzle for you. So as I talked about in Mystery School Volume 3 about the reptilian brain and how we are basically living in a lower brain society. It's the same thing when you look at the flower of life. When you look at the lowest part of the flower of life, Malkuth level, which is Earth, which deals with the materialistic realm, materialism. And this is where we are at. When the Bible talks about Saturn or Satan ruling Earth or being the god of this planet, this is what it's talking about. It's talking about us being stuck in this lower brain, this lower state of materialism, where we are ruled by materialism. And if materialism has to do with the reptilian brain, then the dragon, the serpent, Satan, is indeed the ruler of this planet. This is what everything is about. Everything that we do is to gain some kind of materialism. And we have, gone away from the ancient world of spiritualism. And when Saturn fell, it began the rise of this materialistic world. Again, you had the Europeans take over, and you had them instill all of these materialistic ideals and ideologies wrapped around materialism. That's what it's about, plain and simple. When you input religion, which is supposed to be about going to heaven when you die, the afterlife. It's so many gates in the way blocking you from that deals with materialism. So again, when you look at everything that the Bible tells you to stay away from, it's all materialistic things that's going to keep you back from reaching, true enlightenment and spirituality. So lust, materialism, money, materialism. Everything has to do with something that's materialistic, and we can see that this world is consumed by money and lust. So we can't really rise in spirituality when we are ruled by these things. So if you don't understand this, if you don't have it in your consciousness, this is how it's always going to be. Since the powers that be is running everything, and this is the kind of system they are perpetuating, this is what we are seeing in our society. So when we look at these, athletes and celebrities and hip hop stars or whatever, flashing all these materialistic things and getting people to really, want for something material, a car, a house, or what have you, jewelry, gold, everything is about, again, the fall of consciousness, the fall of the higher brain, and us being, pulled down into our lower brain, which is the reptilian brain that is under control. So it all goes back to Saturn. It goes back to the fall of Saturn as a sun into what we see today. And these people who is controlling everything, this is what they worship. This is what they're putting out. And it's going to all come to something, because there has to be a lot more to this. As I talk about in the Saturn and Satan series, it has to be more. It's not just us here. Something created us and put us here. What that was, we still, have yet to figure out. We know consciousness has the power to create matter, as I talked about. Consciousness, energy, the material. So, it's a lot that we got to look into. It's a lot that happened before this planet was even formed. This universe is very old. In most cases, people believe that it's infinite, which I believe as well, which tells us it never was a time. It never was a beginning. Things always was. So when you think about that, it's like, damn, what the hell has been going on, in this area of the universe where we reside right now. So history is hidden, and they hid it for a reason. But a lot of the clues, we can only get but so far in our research to figuring out what actually happened and what's going on. And it's all about leading to a point and getting to a point where, you are satisfied, but at the same time, you got the kind of knowledge that you need to take the next step as far as growing yourself in consciousness and awareness and in power, energy, or what have you. So, again, this is why I put this information out. This is why I want people to really take heed in this stuff and really understand that it's serious. We can be skeptical about it, and we can, joke about it, but they are super serious about it, and they are ahead because of it, because of what they know, because of what they are doing. And everybody's running around partying and bullshitting, but these people are doing some crazy, weird shit to us. And we need to understand what it's really about. So we got to pay attention to the world and everything that's going on. Again, this whole end of this Cassini mission is supposed to end in September, I believe September 15th or 17th this year. We'll see what happens with that whole thing. Pay attention to what Trump is doing. As you can see, the whole chemical attack in Syria, that's crazy. And it's basically an excuse. That's all it is. They wasn't getting any traction with the whole Syrian war. Assad is still alive. And, they bombed those people. They killed those people. And now they're using it to basically find an excuse to get back into Syria. They're using the media to say that, well, the Syrians are saying that it was Assad. That's stupid. Why would Assad kill these people? For what? He really need all the people that he can get to help protect him. So, it's a lot more going on there. To me, I'm shocked that Assad's still alive. So that tells me he got some kind of real force down there helping him out in Syria for him to actually still be alive. And again, this is the ancient world that stuff is taking place in. We talking about, the history of that place goes back, thousands of years. And for them to be wiping it out and destroying all that history with, like they're doing is crazy. But when you pay attention to what they're conquering, it's all about that ancient world, that they've been conquering. Everything, all that area is, with Egypt and Iran, and all of it's really about Iran. But with Egypt and Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, and everything that's going on in that area, it's all that goes back to ancient times. All those areas and countries have real ancient history, a really deep ancient past. They basically set off a coup in Egypt, and we remember when that was going on, the riots and everything like that. We see what happened with Gaddafi. We see what happened with Saddam. We see what's going on with Assad right now. So we got to pay attention because it's leading to something. And really, once they finish off Syria, they're going to turn their attention to probably North Korea. And we're going to see that. Now, once Syria is completely under control, they'll have Iran surrounded the way they want to. So they might go after Iran. I'm not sure, but Trump's action is definitely going to take us into war, which is going to take us somewhere where we probably don't want to be. It's going to lead us to this World War III. This is soon. Me personally, talking to my military friends, as I said before, they're talking about not going to war for Trump at all. It's a lot of people in the military that is not going to fight for him. It's not going to go to any kind of war. So they're going to try to force their hand. And this is what this whole chemical attack in Syria is about. It might take another terrorist attack in America for something to go down, but they trying, they pushing it. And again, as I said, the presidency is a puppet post. Trump's job is to now fix what Obama, finish what Obama couldn't finish, which was the complete control of the Levant, the complete control of Syria, and everything in that area, and basically leading to wiping out Iran. Remember, they tried to make peace with Iran. If you go back and look, it was talks. They lifted embargoes, or they lifted things off of Iran for a while. Remember, Iran basically nobody could send them anything because of the embargo, because the agreement they had not to give them anything because they was holding back as far as nuclear weapons. But Iran is a death trap. It's just that simple. I think the Iraq-Iran war taught everybody that you can't go into Iran and wage war. It's going to be impossible. So, it's the future now. And we got these drones and these weapons that we don't even know what Iran has. And I'm pretty sure they are prepared for war with us or whoever comes there. So we're going to see. But everything that we have been seeing is leading up to what's going on, to what's happening now. And again, Syria, North Korea, Cuba, we'll see what's going to happen. And once those countries is out the way, if that ever happens, then what's going to happen, what's going to take place. So we really got to pay attention to what's going on, and look at the hidden meaning of a lot of things and the esoteric meaning surrounding the actions of Trump and everything that he's doing, because it's alluding to stuff. So it's a lot more we got to get into involving Saturn and involving extraterrestrials and everything that we have been seeing as far as extraterrestrials pertaining to this planet. The difference between the so-called grays and these orbs, and the supposedly many different races of aliens, which is something I'm going to get into in the next DVD on this. But Saturn is the key, and that's what I wanted you to understand in this DVD. Saturn is the key. What was going on in the ancient world pertaining to Saturn as the sun is huge, and all of it is leading to something. It's not over. It's leading to something, and we'll see what that is. We'll see. If we don't see in this life, some of us will probably see in the next one. But Saturn is the biggest part of it, and I'm 100% convinced of that. But it's still a whole thing about the ring makers of Saturn. These so-called huge vehicles they see in the rings of Saturn. You see a lot of the footage that they have, so-called footage of crafts leaving from the rings and crafts making the rings of Saturn. If you've seen those videos, It's a lot. The black giants, the black beings, which I believe that the Egyptians or I will say the Egyptians or whoever was ruling Kemet before the dynasties came from Saturn. It's a lot of speculation to our civilization being on Mars before Saturn, and then something happening on Mars and us coming here. In any case, we wasn't here first. We wasn't created here. It was definitely somewhere else. Could have been Mars, could have been Saturn. We don't know. But anything that's pertaining to these giants, I believe, has to do with Saturn. And when you look at the hidden meaning of a lot of it, Saturn. It's all talking about Saturn, the sons of God, the daughters of men. Them being giants, the way the Bible describe it. Saturn. It's all about Saturn, and it's just everywhere. And there's a lot more to it. But I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch and purchase the DVD, download the video. And there's a lot more we got to get into. But yeah, we got a lot coming up. A lot more videos on YouTube, a lot more DVDs coming out. And it's just a lot of information. Like I've been really digging into a lot of research lately and just been blowing my mind on stuff I've been finding out that I had no clue about. And I'm super excited whenever I find something new, especially me, because I research a lot. So when I see something new that fits and makes sense, I'm on it. And I spend days just digging in, and just like, it's like a spider web. It's like, everything just be, connecting. Everything just connecting. It's just like it keep going and going and going and going and going until, you get the big picture. You get the, what you're looking for. So that's basically what I've been doing, the last few days, the last few weeks, actually, in this research. But as I talked about in the last DVD, Mystery School Volume 3, I'm getting ready to head to Sweden, going to Spain to do the video on the Moors, because I got to go there anyway. Going to Kemet eventually, just waiting for my group, my people who come with me to get their stuff together. And yeah, it's a lot coming up. But this is a really important video, and this is something you definitely want to put into your consciousness and archive and keep it in your head, as far as the importance of Saturn, and that Saturn was a sun, and all of the things that we see, almost all the things that we see that we think is talking about the sun in the sky is talking about Saturn. It's just that simple. So we got into everything, but it's a lot more to come, a lot more videos, and thank you guys again for taking the time to watch and purchase. See you guys next video.